Totoro, my god, hey. I tickle myself. I know I've already used that pun on Twitter, Instagram stories, and in another video that you won't have seen yet on my channel, but I plan to get mileage out of it. Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my Stager YouTube channel. If you are seeing my face for the first time, hello! My name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I'm an independent theatre critic and a content creator based here in the UK, and this is my Stager YouTube channel where I review shows that I have been invited to see here in the UK, as well as talking about stagey news and drama and gossip happening worldwide. If that sounds like the kind of content that you would be interested in, then make sure you are subscribed. And you can also go and find me on social media at Mickey Joe Theatre on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok to find more stagey content on those platforms as well. So today, if it was not clear, I am going to be talking to you about My Neighbour Totoro, but the new stage adaptation that has just opened at the Barbican Centre here in London's West End. If you're not sure what venue this is, it used to be home to Les Mis once upon a time. It's also where the Broadway revival of Anything Goes transferred to when it came over here with Sutton Foster and then later with Rachel York. That's where the Barbican is. It's an enormous stage which allows for these kind of phenomenal, huge productions, which is exactly what My Neighbour Totoro is. It has already sold very well here in London, and it's just a really impressively staged play. Obviously, it is based on this beloved animated film. If you don't know, this is a 1988 Studio Ghibli film, so the same creators of Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle and Princess Mononoke and Ponyo, all of which I have seen, but I've never seen My Neighbour Totoro. I know! I legit don't even have a good reason why I have never seen this film, and now I feel like I might, after seeing the play. But I was invited to its press night this evening at the Barbican, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So stay tuned for my full review of this production, as well as a little bit of insight into how they actually physically bring this to the stage. Before I get started, if you really enjoyed today's video, not only must you subscribe to my Stager YouTube channel, but feel free to use the super thanks button down below to give me a tip as a Stager content creator. That really helps me to bring you this kind of content regularly. Now we're going to talk about Totoro. Oh yes we are, yes we are. Yes, we are. So the big picture question I want to address first of all is how do they physically bring this to the stage? Now this is a production by the Royal Shakespeare Company because they have a London residence at the Barbican Theatre. And as a general oversimplification of what they do, it is a lot of very impressive puppetry with a decent sized ensemble cast. So My Neighbour Totoro is the story of two girls who move from Tokyo to a rural part of Japan with their father because they want to be closer to the hospital where their mother is being treated for a miscellaneous illness. Very quickly they find out that there are spirits living in the house as well as in the enchanted forest behind the house, specifically under this very large, very old tree. And as the two young girls try to adapt to life in this new environment, they meet Totoro and his other magical forest friends. And they have this joyous background fantasy life while less fun events are unfolding in their real lives. Now, from the very beginning of this show, you get a sense of the stagecraft that they are going to utilize to tell this story, because you have this title card saying My Neighbour Totoro and spelt with the American spelling of neighbor, N-E-I-G-H-B-O-R, without the U. And I, for the longest time, thought this was printed onto a gauze curtain or something, and it's not, because the letters start to move around independently. It wasn't animated, they are puppeteered, they're on sticks and wires, and a U floats down and the R moves over, and it goes in. The audience, being British, loved that. And the word Totoro is made up of these fluffy cloud-like structures that start to dance around. Again, they are independent from the curtain. I didn't spot that straight away, but my boyfriend Aaron did. Eagle eyes that he is. And then you have these puppeteered animals and bugs that start to crawl across it. That was great fun, very whimsical, and just gave you a sense of the kind of wonder and cleverness that you could expect from the rest of the show, which is good because it's then a long time before we see any more creatures. There's a lot of exposition that has to happen. So that lifts up to reveal this very flat landscape, and there's a little picture model of a bus sort of playfully driving along these hills. It goes up one side, it goes up the other side, and then the actual sort of little mini bus car van thing drives onto one side of the stage, and the plot begins from there. But this happens throughout. We shift between little mini representations of things and then seeing the actual thing in real life. It's worth saying as well, stylistically, they are not trying to convince you that anything genuinely magical is happening on stage. It's not that they want you to say, gosh, how are they doing that? You can see the wires, you can see the performers and the puppeteers, and you understand how they are creating all of these effects. They want to show you how they're creating all of these effects, and they allude to it later on. I'll get to that later. But even after that first section where we're puppeteering everything on the show title card, you have two performers come out and bow to acknowledge that that's what they've been doing. So it's definitely a show that shows you what's happening behind the curtain. So right at the beginning of the show, they make it clear in an announcement that they do not want you to take any pictures of the puppets. And there have been no pictures of the puppets released. If you look at the production images for this show, it is just of the characters as played by human beings. So I am going to talk about the puppets and describe them because that's what other print reviews have done. They have talked about these puppets. I am going to do the same thing, but if you do not want to know, if you want it to be a fun surprise because it is a quite awe-inspiring and stunning moment when we meet some of these puppets, then feel free to skip ahead to the next section. Those of you who are still with me, let's talk about some Totoro puppets. So like I said, it is a long time before we meet any. We meet these little like ball of dust type creatures that look like little spiders that kind of float around the walls. They're quite clever, the effect's quite good, but it's nothing hugely revolutionary in terms of onstage puppeteering. Life of Pi does similar things with its neon fish. You know, we've seen things on sticks moving around before. Where we start to really push the boat out is when we then have these little Totoro creature puppets. Now there are three characters. There is Totoro, who is huge. There is a smaller blue version of Totoro and an even smaller white version of Totoro. We meet the white one first. He does this clever little like pop up out of the ground in different places type thing. It's clever how they do that. You can work out how they're doing it, but it's still clever. And the way he moves across the stage is so adorable. He does this little shuffly thing with his feet, and then he starts to do it even faster. It's really, really cute. Then we meet the blue one, who is my absolute favourite because he's just so playful and silly, and he's like a little burglar type guy, and he has this bag, and he just steals stuff, and the bag is full of acorns. I just love him. I think he has so much personality, and I really enjoyed him. There was not enough content of blue medium-sized Totoro for me. But then eventually we meet Big Totoro, and when I say Big Totoro, he is huge. We meet him lying down in a forest. Here's a visual representation of what that looks like. And he is, gosh, maybe 10 feet tall to the top of his belly. He's enormous. He takes up the entire stage, and it's a big inflatable Totoro that is still being puppeteered from beneath. So immediately his little toe claws are flexing up and down. You see him breathing. His mouth moves. He like scratches himself slightly and shuffles around. He is a living, breathing character that they have created on this stage. Amazingly, Mei, who is the youngest of the two girls, who is the first one to meet Totoro, scales him and climbs up onto his belly and kind of uses it as a trampoline. And she sits there and interacts with him. But it's really interesting how they've structured this puppet so that it can breathe, and it's clearly inflated, but still structured enough that it can support her weight at the top of his stomach. And that's when it starts really animating itself. And it is very steady to introduce each little new thing it does, but it's so impressive that the audience laps up every tiny thing. You know, its mouth opens, its tongue moves, we see teeth for the first time. Every slight facial expression that they can perpetrate is amazing. And also, I think, one of the most animated puppets that we've ever seen on stage. Like, we've seen amazing, uncanny, animalistic behavior in shows like Warhorse and shows like Life of Pi, but we've never seen facial expression on a puppet quite like we have with this. We next meet a slightly smaller version of Big Totoro. He is walking forwards while the girls are waiting at a bus stop in the rain with an umbrella. They offer him an umbrella and he kind of takes it off them and works out how to hold it. It's a little bit painstaking seeing the performers kind of link up their hands with his hand to take the umbrella and then pass it to the other hand with his hand and another performer hand for him to then turn it upside down and connect it to a stick. And you can see the machinations of all of this going on. And like I said, you can see the performers. They're not trying to hide all of that from you. But because he's so expressive and because he's so endearing, you don't care. Your eyes go to him. It's like that old thing with Avenue Q. A great puppeteer can make you look at the puppet, but a great performer sometimes will steal attention away from the Avenue Q puppet. In My Neighbour Totoro, you are just looking at Totoro. And we get even more facial expression from him in this scene. It's amazing the things he could do. He like narrows his eyes because he's skeptical. His eyes dart back and forth because he's not sure about this umbrella he's being offered. When he smiles for the first time with his teeth and when he roars, it's amazing. It's honestly so good. He doesn't do much in this show. He doesn't speak. He utters his name in this very deep, guttural, bassy voice a couple of times, but he's not like having full conversations with you. He is not Hamlet. Alas, poor Totoro. But the fact that they can walk him forwards from the back of the stage and he is that size is impressive enough. The fact that he can look like he's holding something, the fact that he can look backwards and forwards, it's all really impressive. At the very end of the first act, we then get another smaller again size Totoro puppet alongside the other two little smaller Totoro characters. And I'm not completely sure why that one has to be smaller again, but it still worked. We're still drawn to his just endearing personality. This is another spoiler that you may not want to know about, but the very end of Act 1 is so sweet. Basically, they're all about to go off on this adventure together, and so we see them on stage, a curtain comes in, and then they have this little, like, stuffed version of Totoro, bigger than this, but smaller than the one on the stage, with little, like, dolls of the two girls attached to it, and it starts flying across the stage, and then it does a Mary frickin' Poppins, and it flies out across the audience, and I lost my entire mind, and it won my heart in that moment. I was not expecting a defying gravity ending to Act 1 of My Neighbour Totoro. That was incredible. And that was probably my highlight moment of the show. I know I'm in a puppet section right now and I'm messing up my talking points, but that was my favourite part, my favourite moment. There are some other puppets in the show as well. So you have the cat bus. Now let me tell you, because everything in Totoro's movement is so slow and so measured and so steady, the cat bus, when it just comes in as this luminescent, fully inflated, enormous size of the stage cat bus that is a cat that's also a bus, whose eyes are headlights and who has this inflatable tail and like a million legs, and again, is a bus, when that just whooshes in from the side at full speed, that blew my entire tiny mind. And they did such clever things with shadow puppetry on it as well, because Totoro boards the cat bus, so it pulls up in front of him, blocks the giant Totoro puppet, and then we see a silhouette of him appear in the window. They do that trick again 2 more times later in the show. I could just watch it all day. I absolutely love the cat bus puppet. It's amazing. The way it moves and the way it glides around, it reminds me of the elegance of the puppetry in Ocean at the End of the Lane that I saw earlier this year. There's something really beautiful and just fantastical and enchanting about the way that it moves. You also have some real life animals portrayed with puppetry as well. So you have a bunch of chickens. Oh, they're really sweet. I loved the chickens when they come on. I like chickens generally, but the way that they are puppeteered on these wires, again, it's really clear and it's been done before in that kind of a style, but they're really funny and whimsical and sassy. And I love when you can portray a expression and portray a feeling and a characteristic in an animal that's just a little thing on the end of a stick. That's clever puppetry and that's clever acting. There's such an art to great puppetry. That's the thing, is we're just coming off of an Olivier Awards season where Best Supporting Actor in a Play went to the 7 actors who played the tiger in The Life of Pi. So that's finally being recognised. Are we going to see Olivier Award recognition for the puppet performers in My Neighbour Totoro? Very possibly. Will Totoro be this year's Best Supporting Actor in a Play? Could be. Could be. It could be. Listen, it could be your time. There is also a goat, and I like the way the goat is portrayed, but it's not like a friendly, happy goat. it's a slightly menacing goat. I preferred the Life of Pi goat. You know, he was friendlier. This goat intimidates me. There was so much to love about this show. I love the way that they use music. This is all of the music from the film, including the iconic Totoro song. The music was composed by Joe Hisaishi, who is also a co-producer on this version of the show. So yes, we are absolutely incorporating the music. You can see the band at the back. There is a singer as part of the band who sings in Japanese as well as English. Generally speaking, I preferred the singing in Japanese because some of the English lyrics were a little bit on the nose, but then I don't speak Japanese and it just sounded beautiful and meaningful to me, and it could have been just as on the nose in Japanese. So if anyone knows what the Japanese lyrics mean, you can enlighten us in the comments. Were they deep and poetic, or were they just obvious and unoriginal? Not often do I say this, but I really liked the way that they staged the bows, because they do away with the puppets until the very end of the bows, and you see all of the puppeteer performers. But what they do is they make all the shapes they've been doing throughout the show to indicate what roles they have been playing. So you have whoever was Totoro making a Totoro shape and mimicking the same movement. You have the people who animated this bus prop that was going around. You have the cat bus people being a cat bus. You have people pretending to be chickens and pretending to be goats. It's a really nice way of indicating the work that they were responsible for, so you can applaud and recognize their work throughout the show. I think so often we have puppetry performers who aren't necessarily recognized specifically for what they did, and I like that this acknowledges that. Another thing I really liked the set. You know, it had that same kind of whimsical puppetry feel built into the set. You had these plants that people walked on attached to their shoes, like skis. You had these cornfields where people were holding up these corns and moving with them in the breeze. Just all clever and innovative and ingenious ways of bringing something to life and breathing life into these scenes we're creating on stage. We're not just putting a prop on stage and leaving it there. It's this living, moving, feeling thing because it's puppeteered and it's animated, and puppetry became the language with which we told this story, and I think that's incredibly special. If Back to the Future is an amazing version of putting a sci-fi film onto a stage in a way you didn't think was possible, this is putting an animated film onto stage in a way that nobody thought was possible. So we've gotten this far and I haven't actually given you my star rating. Now, I loved this show. It stole my heart. I have an awful lot of time for it. I think it's amazing. I wish it every success. It is a 4-star show for me, and I'm going to talk about some of the limitations that make it a 4-star show rather than a 5-star. Now, from what I understand, I have not seen the film, but I have heard from others, and I've done a little bit of research that seem to indicate it is a very faithful adaptation. And when you just take the plot of a film and translate it directly into a stage version without necessarily adapting the material, there can be a few little theatrical shortcomings, because the two media are very different things. Writing for film and writing for theatre, stylistically there are differences, and there are things that work for one that don't work for the other. Especially when you have a 2-act structure. Now, because we have an interval in the middle, you have this first act that is sort of devoid of tension or threat or menace or any kind of problem. It's just a lot of exposition and sort of very little subplot and sunny and happy, joyous goings on. And then the second gets very intense and sort of stays there for much of the time and is quickly resolved. Now, in a film, you have your tension and you have your issues towards the second half of the film, and that works and that makes sense. But for a play, it feels just a little bit unbalanced. I will also say the first act is very long. It is 90 minutes long. So for this to be a family show, that is a lot for children to sit through. Not that this is necessarily a family show. I think there are a lot of people who can enjoy this. You don't have to be a child to enjoy this show. I think it's actually deceptively very sophisticated theatre. But this will also attract family audiences and children, which I think is fantastic. But just to make you aware, Shillong. And it's reasonably slow going at the beginning as well. You know, a lot of scenes are slower and go on for longer than they ought to, and they can be quite visually impressive. There's a scene in the second act where the cat bus is flying around for a really long time. There's another scene in the second act where May is running through wheat fields for a really long time, like she's Theresa May, pre-government. Just pacing-wise, it really takes its time to get anywhere. And it's not like there's an enormous amount of plot. You know, mostly when they run into Totoro, they just kind of vibe. The start of the second act, incredibly whimsical. We have these little, like, 2D models of them being puppeteered to make tunes by blowing through like bowls and creating these whistling noises. It's nothing but cutesy vibes, and it's great to see how they've done it stylistically, but it doesn't really take us anywhere. So it is not a hugely compelling narrative. The one sort of linear piece of plot we have that grounds the show in a little bit more depth is wrapped up very neatly right at the end in this curtain call sequence that used to be the credits from the original film. So I could have done with some more depth in a few places, I could have done with a little bit more subplot, but I also appreciate that this is a beloved film and they did not want to move too far away from it. Could they have done more to tighten up the plot a little bit? Could they have shifted a couple of things around so there is more foreshadowing of issues and tension in the first act and we don't just save it all for the second act? Possibly. Could the interval have just straight up gone in a different place? Perhaps. Let's talk about the performances of this cast. Now, this was an entirely Asian cast, which you love to see in a show like this. I think it's important. So Mae Mak played Mei, who was the younger of the two sisters, and Ami Okamura-Jones played Satsuki, who was the elder of the two sisters. They were both fantastic. Mae Mak was so believable in just being absolutely young, and I mean, she was playing a very small child. And everything she did was completely familiar of how a small child behaves, with this fearlessness and then overtaken by this actual legitimate fear and this distress and this worry and this anxiousness and this instant kinship with this giant, formidable, potentially terrifying monster that she just loves because he's so fluffy and he's got such a big belly. She was completely endearing. You really rooted for her throughout. She could have gotten annoying as this whiny child. She never did. It never became grating. She was just a really lovable protagonist, as was Ami Okamura-Jones as Satsuki, just a really grounded older sibling that you really felt for, especially in the second act. Got to deal with some really weighty and deep character material in that second act. The entire ensemble cast did a brilliant job and worked together as such a well-oiled machine on stage. Jackie Tate specifically gave a lovely little supporting turn as an elder grandmother type of a character who was one of their neighbours, who ended up looking after them and offering sort of sage wisdoms occasionally. But I really enjoyed her performance. It was really grounding, it was really believable, and it had this lovely sincerity to it. Because I worried she was just going to come in as this stern figure, and it was so much more than that. There was so much depth to it, you know, because she was an authoritarian, but still very maternal and very warm and very willing to dream and fantasize and had that twinkle and had such patience for them. I mean, I think children could just fall in love with this show. I think they could forgive the pacing issues and they would just enjoy the visuals and everything that's happening. And I think particularly for this, because it shows you the wires and the performers, and because children can be so inquisitive about stuff like that, I don't think it will ruin the magic of it for them. I think it just answers their questions, and it's a great way of showing children the capabilities of theatre. It took me until I was 16 to really understand, beyond like your most obvious musicals, what theatre could do, and I think if they get to learn that lesson really early on, it's going to inspire a lot of people in some really interesting creative ways. Also, just wonderful Asian representation on stage. You have this beautiful animated film from Asian culture being beautifully portrayed, stylistically, culturally, exactly how you would want it to be. It feels so authentic, it's so wonderful. It's great to see so much Asian talent platformed in this production, which also extends beyond the cast to the creative team, which is something that I really appreciate. But like I said, you do not have to be a child, or you do not have to take a child with you to enjoy this production. I think it works on so many levels. It's just a beautiful piece of theatre. It's like art on the stage. I will say, warning, if you do take a child, that they are going to want to buy one of these Totoro plushes, and this is one of the smaller and less expensive options, so don't say I haven't warned you. If you want to know more about the experience of going to see My Neighbour Totoro at the Barbican, I have documented it as part of my new weekly vlog series, Oh My God Hey. You'll have to check out episode 9 of Oh My God Hey that is dropping on my channel this Sunday. But for now, those are all of my thoughts on My Neighbour Totoro at the Barbican Theatre. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to get tickets to this production, act fast. It is very popular and you're going to have to get them quick. If you've already seen this show, or you're going to be seeing it soon, or you're a big fan of the film, let me know in the comments section down below all your thoughts on My Neighbour Totoro as a stage play. If you really enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for plenty more stagey content. Go find me on other social media as well, at Mickey Joe Theatre. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!